Hey everyone, it's Jamie and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well today. And today we are going to be doing something a little fun. So, for those who don't know or kind of missed it, we recently had a Hispanic Heritage Month inspired update for The Sims 4. So I decided that I wanted to do something, I guess, kind of inspired by Hispanic Heritage Month. For those who don't know, because I've noticed on Twitter there was a lot of confusion about what actually is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I actually went to the National Hispanic Heritage website just to get a quick definition here. So through September 15th to October 15th is celebrated a nationwide National Hispanic Heritage Month here in the United States. It traditionally honors the cultures and contributions of both Hispanic and Latino Americans as we celebrate heritage rooted in all Latin American countries. During this month and throughout the year, the National Hispanic Heritage Association and those sites and their partners share history, heritage, and accomplishments from Hispanic and Latino Americans of the past and present. For those who don't know, Hispanic is a term that refers to a person who is from or descendant from someone who is from a Spanish-speaking country. So that would include Spain, for example. Latino, Latinx, Latina, however, refers to a person who is from or a descendant of someone who is from Latin America. I saw a lot of conversations on Twitter from some people, some simmers from Spain, who were a little upset that Hispanic Heritage Month here in the U.S. seemed to be focused just on Latinx culture. Yeah, that's kind of the point. I am sorry. That is kind of, what this month is about. It's about us celebrating Latino Americans. So, one thing I did want to think about when I was, because I wanted to do a little build, participate a little in the celebration. We just got some really nice Latinx American inspired items for the game, which is nice. A bunch of new foods. So I was like, okay, what can I do? Well, for those who don't know, in my undergraduate degree, I heavily studied the ancient Maya. Some people, you may or may not know who the ancient Maya are. There are currently still a contemporary Maya people in Latin America to this day. So, when we talk about the ancient Maya, we are talking about the ancestors of the contemporary Maya. So I don't want to be talking about these people as if they're dead, because, they're still alive, and I think that's a huge misconception about them. The Maya, they occupied an area of what is known as Mesoamerica, which stretches pretty much the almost entirety of Central America, and the Maya pretty much dominated a very large part of it. The Maya are in some ways kind of seen as almost the ancient Greeks. We can compare it to, in the sense that they're these independent city-states like ancient Greece was, that aren't necessarily unified, but they all speak a similar language and have like a similar mythology and religion and belief. But, they're not, other than that, they have their own individual peoples. There are like the Quiche Maya, as well as Nawa speaking Maya. Pretty much Maya is, more of a contemporary term we use to group these people together that have a similar cultural background. Maya is the correct term when speaking about these people. A lot of people use the term Mayan. Maya and Mayan are kind of complicated, or not super complicated. We'll go over it quickly. So yeah, like I said, a lot of people misuse the term Maya, or they'll even sometimes say Mayas. You can just use Maya, and it refers to both plural and singular. And when you talk about Maya, you would say, Maya architecture, Maya people, Maya art, Maya folklore, Maya pyramid, Maya temple, which we're building today. And then the term Mayan refers solely to language. There's about 32 languages that were spoken across all Maya people. And when we refer to the language, we say Mayan, like this is the Mayan word for blank. In Mayan, that translates to blank. So, little history there, or I guess grammar there. So, that was what I studied a lot in my undergraduate. I was so lucky enough to have one of my papers I wrote actually be allowed to be presented, or was picked to be presented at an undergraduate art history symposium where I talked about ancient Maya art depictions of gendered bodies. It's a paper I'm very proud of to this day. I also studied, Mesoamerica at a larger, kind of glance too. I also studied the Mexica, who we now refer to as the Aztecs. And I decided I wanted to build here in Selva Dorada. Selva Dorada is the world we got with Jungle Adventure. It has inspiration from both Mesoamerican culture like the Maya and the Aztecs, as well as, contemporary Central American countries and cultures as well. Here we're building on this lot is it's supposed to be a museum, and I decided I wanted to build a Maya temple. I really like Jungle Adventure. I think it's a pretty fun pack. I also, being someone who studied Mesoamerica, really like a lot of the interesting details they picked, as well as some of their inspirations. I also really like that they didn't go in the same route that they did, for example, with World Adventures, where they decided to do a pack an Egyptian world that they said was Egypt, and they, picked mummies. I don't know, I just feel like it was kind of weird, especially since, mummies have such a important history in that culture of the ancient Egyptians. So I was really glad for this pack that they didn't necessarily do one specific culture of Mesoamerica. They kind of took from a few different ones. And while I can understand why some people would say that's problematic, I think it's for the best. I think if you're going to take a living or dead cultures as we find them in Mesoamerica, both living and dead, a lot of those ancient Mesoamerican cultures, still are alive to this day. When you do something like that, it kind of, I don't know, it can feel a little problematic. So I was really glad that they didn't, do anything too specific. So, the pack here took a lot of inspiration from Mesoamerica. And I noticed, the temples in the pack, they're definitely reminiscent of the pyramids you see that were built by the Aztecs and the Maya, but they're not exactly. So I decided that I was going to go in and I wanted to build one more of that you would actually see created by the Maya. I think the temples that we have in the game, they're fun for gameplay, but I was like, I think it'd be nice if we could have something that was a little bit more truer to the inspiration for this pack. So that's what I decided to do, and I'm pretty happy with how this came out. As you can see there, I put individual blocks that were debug items from this pack between the different, I guess like steps you could call them, that I built with the half walls, because I was really trying to create that effect that you see on all Maya temples. And I'll have some images throughout the video so you can kind of see my inspiration. So, and then since this is also a museum lot, I could have made it a park, I could have changed, but I still like the idea of keeping it as a museum. So up at the top of the temple, which would usually be where they do certain ceremonies, in ancient Maya and Aztec, because the Aztecs had similar pyramids. Their ideas of their pyramids actually came from an abandoned city that was abandoned by the time the Aztecs came to Mesoamerica. Yeah, they come very late in the game, but they come pretty late. And by the time they get there, there's the city of that belongs to the quote unquote Toltecs. And we know whoever those people were. We don't really know who they were. We have some idea of who they were. We know that the Maya traded with them. And then we know the Maya, the ancient Maya, that is, traded with them and were inspired by their architecture. But we don't know much about them. And I think part of the things about them that gets confusing is, the Aztecs referred to them as the Toltecs, which is in Nawa, which is what the Aztecs spoke, just means artisan. And they kind of had these mythos created by them, by the Aztecs. So it's kind of hard to know what's true about them, what's not. And there are things we know that aren't true, like the Aztecs claim to kind of create their claim as being this important power source, because they move into Mesoamerica and start taking over the Mexican Valley to kind of help establish their claim to their powers. They claim that they're related to the Toltecs, which we know is not true. They had been, that city had been abandoned for almost centuries by the time the Aztecs actually come into Mesoamerica. So yeah, there's a lot we don't know about the Toltecs, but we know that their architectural style really influenced both the Maya and the Aztecs. So that's kind of this shape we have here that you see in a lot of Mesoamerican architecture. And that's another thing. A lot of Mesoamerican cultures, they're all very different. They have very nuanced and also some pretty big differences, but they do share a lot of similarities. And I think that's why this pack works so well, where they're taking, multiple ideas from these different cultures. It works because they do share so much in common. It, like I said, once again, it's almost like the ancient Greek city-states, where they're all very different and distinct, but they have similarities. They share the same pantheon religion. They all speak, similar languages. Like ancient Greek, there were different dialects from each city-state, very similar to how the ancient Maya did as well. Some other cool things about the Maya I want to talk about, since we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, which would include, people who of Latino background who share that history also with the indigenous peoples of the Americas, including the Maya. Some really cool things about them is to this day, it's still considered that the Spanish never fully conquered the Maya people. And it's something that many Maya people and activists are very proud of. And I think that's a very cool and very important aspect to keep in mind when we think about the Maya. Another thing, when the Spanish did come, they did find a bunch of abandoned city-states. And that was after the classic period for the Maya. There was a kind of post-classic cultural collapse that the Maya, that across the Maya world was felt. And what it was brought on by constant warfare between the different city-states, as well as brought on by environmental damages caused by, the resources it took to build and maintain these massive cities that they had, in these massive temples. I think people think of often the Americas as being very primitive, when in fact, they had a very complex system. And in the Aztecs, for example, they had aqueducts and running water. The Maya also, there are some temples and palaces that the elites lived in that we see that they had running water, they had aqueducts, they had complex systems, much almost a little comparable to the ones in Europe, but I feel like you don't need to compare them to the ones in Europe to see them and see how important they are. A lot of these temples also would have been beautifully decorated with paint, and decorated in and would have been very well maintained. But after the classic collapse, due to environmental and constant war issues, a lot of them were abandoned, a lot of these city states. So a lot of the temples fell into disrepair that way, as well as also during the Spanish conquest, some of them were abandoned. It's a very, there's a lot of interesting and different, things that go on. And a lot of these sites, even though, not until, the 1800s, 1900s, and even, a lot of these sites that, were not discovered till then by, archaeologists, a lot of the contemporary Maya still knew where these sites were. And many of them, still went to them for certain rituals. A lot of Maya people now have this really interesting religion that's a mix of both their ancient practices mixed with like Catholicism. That's a very interesting, conversation to have. Also, the way Catholicism and the indigenous religions of both of all Mesoamerica, really, the way they all really meshed well together, oddly enough. So you have contemporary Maya people who go to these ancient sites, and a lot of these ancient sites too that are now being maintained by governments and being maintained as like these cultural sites. A lot of them will set apart certain days of the year that tourists can't go and visit, that it's left for that the ancient Maya or the contemporary Maya can go and still practice their kind of ancient beliefs, and in a lot of the cultural and things that they still do, they can go do here. So it's still a pretty the contemporary Maya, they're still very in touch with those ancient roots. And like I said, a lot of the ancient sites we found are actually from contemporary Maya people bringing archaeologists there and saying, hey, these are our old sites. And there's actually a big move right now between a lot of Mesoamerican scholars who are working in in Central America in with the contemporary Maya, where the goal is trying to use outside resources to help preserve these sites within eventually, which a lot of them have already started, but the eventual goal is to hand over these cultural sites to people who live in this parts of the world, because as of right now, a lot of these archaeologists are from America. A lot of them are from Europe. So the goal is to try to put it back in the hands of people who live in Central America and be like, this is your cultural history, do what you want. But the goal is help them, because a lot of these sites were they're buried in the jungles, because the ancient Maya, they would not bulldoze, but they would chop down whole forests. And then after the collapse, these jungles grew back, so a lot of their these places were lost to time, and now they're being rediscovered and being cleaned up. The brush in the age brushed away. So, and the goal now is to put it back in the hands of often also contemporary Maya people, if not just the state, like the Guatemalan government, Ecuador, other Central American countries that are part of that Maya life. So yeah, this is I really love how this build came out. I hope you guys like it. It's on my gallery. Go check it out. And like I said, you can download it. And I have some other builds that are going to come up after Hispanic month is over, sadly, but they're still inspired by Hispanic Heritage Month. So anyways, I hope you liked this video. Hopefully you learned something useful. Well, I rambled about the Maya. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, give me a likes up, leave a comment. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy Hispanic Heritage Month and happy Halloween.